Climate resilience.
Oh, so I mean, this is kind of the one that's pretty easy in terms of what people would expect, I would say, in terms of unwinding the whole of government approach and reforming the international institutions is a big one too. But maybe the one we'll focus on is and then of course unleashing all energy innovation, which we'll talk about nuclear. We talked about NEPA. That's key to all energy innovation. But let's see, what was I? Oh, maybe the key one to talk about is the resilience itself, because the broader term I use is called climate mastery. So it's the ability of using energy and machines and technology and intelligence to neutralize climate danger and amplify or create climate opportunity or benefit. So an example of the latter would be taking...
It's like a definition of civilization.
Yes. Well, civilization is environmental mastery, right? We've civilized nature. That people used to realize that. They used to not worship the unimpacted environment. They used to want to civilize it so that they could...
And that's because they had to live in it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's for sure.
It's like if you live, right, people live in our mastered, civilized environment, and they think everything they like about it is natural and everything they dislike is unnatural, is human created. But yeah, so the mastery element, so if we can do things like make, a very snowy area into an expensive paradise, like Snowbird, Utah, where I'll go snowboard a lot, right? That used to be a menace, but through climate mastery, we've made it a very expensive destination through the, warm buildings and the synthetic clothing and stuff. So one point about climate people need to get is there's not even really such thing as a climate negative, depending on your level of mastery. Because anything, like if you have enough mastery, you can sort of make use of anything.
I live in Scottsdale. Right. It's a desert.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to live there because there's water.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It'd be a rough place otherwise.
And at some point, we'll be able to, people will customize the temperature there more and do all sorts of stuff. Or hurricanes, like if you could harness the energy of a hurricane, you would be thrilled every time a hurricane came around, right? So we have to have that mentality with climate danger, that the higher your level of mastery, the higher your level of resilience, and any given challenge ceases to become a problem. And it can, in fact, become a benefit. Like the snow can become a benefit, or heat can become a benefit when it was a harm before. And there
or endless sunshine in the desert for solar panels.
Yeah, but it's not really endless, unfortunately.
Well,
it's not like being out in space. If it were out in space, then it would be a lot better. Well, then you have to beam it to the ground, right? But it's unfortunately not endless all the time. Otherwise, it would be nice. It'd be a lot better. We could make a lot more use of solar, which has certain advantages. Like it's really cheap to make the panels, but its fuel source is very problematic. But if we take mastery, like maybe an area to focus on is something like wildfires, because wildfires is an important area of mastery because it's the one where the green anti-development movement has most impeded us. So with most things, like people think we're more endangered from hurricanes, we're less. They think we're more endangered from floods, we're less. And a lot of that is we've at least semi-allowed ourselves to master our environment. Now, the more governments are controlling these things, we're leaving a lot of opportunity on the table, including we reward people we give them free flood insurance, so we reward them for living in disaster-prone areas. Policies like NEPA prevent you from being more resilient more quickly. So there's all sorts of ways in which we're not mastering our environment and making it climate resilient to the extent we could. I'd say DeSantis in Florida is a good counterexample. Like he's very focused on the right kinds of things. Like, hey, let's harden our grid, let's harden our infrastructure, let's lower the number of days we have down. Like he's very good on that. I think he has that kind of mentality, and that state seems very open to that kind of leadership. But around the country, we don't have that as much. But wildfires are this very conspicuous thing where in many ways they've gotten worse, right? Like where you'll see, certainly in California, we have these dangerous out of control wildfires. And of course, people jump to, oh, well, it's Mother Nature punishing us for our sins. Like if only we hadn't used those evil fossil fuels, we would have a totally, pristine, lush forest that never caught on fire and never endangered anyone. So we just have to make a net zero pledge, and then we'll have no emissions. The rest of the world will have no emissions. And then the forest will like us again. That's like Newsom's plan, more or less. Basically, exactly his plan. But actually, it's pretty easy to deal with dangerous, out of control wildfires. Like there are places that deal with this very well, because really they are dangerous and out of control if they have a certain fuel load, which is based on like the amount of dead wood and stuff that's allowed to
We
accumulate.
learned that in Canada when the town of Jasper burnt to the ground because people ignored, the federal government particularly ignored the fuel load that was gathering around the town, despite repeated warnings.
Yeah, and you've seen, I mean, there are books going back decades talking about around the country that this is a problem. And the way I think of California is we've engineered through like government controlled land, federal and California controlled land, and these green policies that basically say thou shalt not interfere with nature. You've just allowed this huge accumulation of fuel load. You have this these huge unbroken things of forest, which people think are a good idea, but that's just the ultimate environmental hazard. Like the California forest is the biggest environmental hazard in the United States. If it were a company, it would not be allowed to exist because it's such a big threat to just allow all this. It's basically like building a forest bomb. The way we've set it up. So we need to take advantage of fuel load management, including logging, which we used to be allowed to do. Like that's a hugely important thing. You need to have things like fire breaks. And like we should really think of how do we engineer the forest so that it's really, really manageable. But that requires this pro-human way of thinking about things. And I think this is an issue where Trump's definitely on the right track about it. But he recognizes, it's the forest management thing. We need to be open to a lot of stuff, including ultimately how much of this can, I don't know if the current administration or Congress will do this, but like how much of this can be privatized or how can but you really need to start to think of forests as an environmental danger. You cannot just allow them to exist. You can't allow anything in a society to exist in a way that is a mortal danger to the human population.
Or even to the forest itself. I mean, one of the problems, as far as I've been able to tell, is that if forests are managed in such a way that undergrowth builds up and builds up. When they do burn, which they will, they can burn so hot that they burn the topsoil out.
Yeah.
Right. So that's obviously not good for the long-term viability of the forest itself.
Yeah, there's a question of like when you're thinking, like, what exactly does that mean? Like, so the forest is just a collection of things. So it's not like the forest is like one little.
Right.
It's like not a forest being. But yeah, in terms of the forest for any purpose you would want it for, right? Yeah, but it's just we have this very like religious, unimpacted nature worship attitude toward forests in particular, I think. And that's not what our ancestors
That's where the unicorns hang out,
I guess, I don't know. It's just everyone loves these areas like Alaska and the California forest where they don't go, but they really want them unchanged. And they're really willing to inflict a lot of harm on the local residents. Alaska is the ultimate example. Like everyone claims to care about the Arctic. Like, I don't know why you're so against development in a place where there's almost no life. Like, why are you so against that? The reason is because there's not much there, and it's always easier to oppose progress in a new area than an existing area. Right? That's why they focus on it. But it doesn't make sense. Why are you against drilling in the Arctic? There's so little there. Like, you'd be much more against drilling.
It's white. It's white.
It's white, but they don't want to
get dirty.
They don't. Exactly.
Well, it's something like that.
But
it's a purity violation.
But it's always, it's to your point, they're not in it. They're not near it. So they just have this fantasy in their head.
If they were in it, they would die too.
Yeah. You're like, if you go outside there, you're not like, maybe we do need some oil here to keep us.
Quickly.
Yeah.